fast down that circle. Good morning, everyone. Convening the Committee on Labor and Government Operations. It is Thursday, March 21st, 2024, about 10 a.m. in conference room 309. We have one bill on the agenda and then a number of resolutions. First up, we have SB 3007 ST2 relating to hiring. First testifier is Department of Human Resource Development in opposition.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair. I'm Brenna Hashimoto, Director of DHERD, and we'll stand on our written testimony in opposition to this measure, and I'm available for any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Department of Transportation with comments. Should be via Zoom. Not present? Anyone from DOT here? Okay, next up is Hawaii Department of Health with comments.
Morning, chairs. My name is Lauren Kim. I'm the Planning and Policy Officer for the Department of Health. DOH submitted comments requesting a significant amendment as a new Part 2 that volunteers the department for a pilot program that pushes down minimum qualification review to the program level with oversight and final vetting from our Human Resources Office. That being said, we are aware there are other vehicles moving, and we defer to the wisdom of the committee on adopting the amendments and the evolution of other bills moving through the legislature. So thank you very much. I'm available for questions.
Okay, thank you. Last up, we have UPW in person with in support.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair Tulisi Fai on behalf of UPW. We stand in our written testimony in support of this bill.
Okay. Anyone else here wishing to comment on this bill? Anyone on Zoom? All right. Member, any questions?
Sure. DHERD, please. I just wanted to ask if you had a chance to review DOH's proposal to have them serve as the pilot for such an effort.
No, I have not. It was not provided.
Oh, okay.
This was the same program that they proposed on the Senate side for the Office of Process Improvement bill that I think was adopted. Do you recall that?
No.
Okay. Okay, I've got some questions for you too, but do you have more? Okay,
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so we've been talking about this bill for a little bit. In the meantime, I know in our first hearing, you had agreed to talk to Department of Health to try to work out some delegation. I'm wondering how many other departments have requested delegation of authority to do more direct hiring?
We have received interest from two departments, Department of Land and Natural Resources and Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism.
In addition to Department of Health?
Well, yes.
Okay, so three departments. How many of them do have delegated authority?
None of them. They have, the two I mentioned have undergone training, but they're still determining which classes of work they'd like to take on delegation. So they have not gotten back to us as to how extensive or restrictive they'd like to, which classes of work they'd like to pursue.
And how long have they been sitting on that?
I think we conducted training maybe three weeks ago or so, roughly.
Okay, so not too long.
3 or 4 weeks.
How about DOH?
DOH, there's been no movement from DOH.
Okay. My understanding from speaking with DOH is that they did want to have delegated authority to do hiring. In fact, they're coming through with this. Maybe DOH could share its testimony. Do you have another copy of it? I'm not putting you on the spot. You don't have to review it right now, but that's to review later. Yeah, they gave it to you. I'm giving it to you about 10 minutes before they actually gave it to me. So we both haven't really reviewed it very much. My understanding of that program, though, is that they're asking for delegated authority on a pilot basis to review applicants in a more expedited manner. So DOH has been talking about this for a while. I'm wondering why the two departments can't work something out and why they're coming to the legislature again to have a legislative fix to this problem.
Well, since middle of last week, we are now offering departments the opportunity to take on delegation for shared classes of work. So if I could just back up a minute. For the last several decades, DHERD has allowed departments to seek delegation and take on the full scope of recruitment activities for classes which are unique to them. So that's been on the books for a very long time, and we've had a number of departments who have taken on delegation, including the Department of Health. But for them, it's their delegation is perhaps maybe, well, I have the list with me actually. I think they have 8 or 9 series that they've taken on, which is only about 100, reflects 151 positions in their department. So there's substantial room for them to expand the delegation that has already been available to them. And then as of last week, we also rolled out a new type of delegation called holo delegation, which allows departments similarly to take on the full scope of recruitment activities for classes which are shared amongst many departments. So between those two programs, the Department of Health should be able to meet all of their needs in terms of delegated recruitment and being able to prioritize their own recruitment activities and take that on.
I know in speaking with Department of Health, they had some concerns about the HOLO program, and well, I'll let you work it out with them. I don't want to get in the middle of you two, but I know that there were some concerns with the other departments about the HOLO program and how it would operate. My concerns more about the bill are that your objection to it doesn't seem to be, it seems to be contrary to the status quo, in that departments are currently allowed to hire internally, and correct me if I'm wrong, well, let me just ask you, are they allowed to hire internally for positions that are shared between departments currently?
Yes.
Okay, so if Department of Health wanted to hire, I always use clerk 3, I don't mean to pick on clerks. If they're hiring like a clerk 3 or office assistant 3, and that's, their office assistant 3 is in DHERD and DOH and everywhere, they can review the minimum qualifications internally of an applicant and hire that applicant. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So they're all, I guess I'm failing to understand your opposition to this bill then for that aspect, because it seems like they're already hiring internally, but they're already hiring and doing all of the minimum qualification review for a position that is shared between the departments. So when in your testimony, you're saying that this might result in allowing the departments to hire these positions, might result in violations of the merit principle, might result in different treatment of different candidates between departments. I mean, isn't that already happening?
No, I think what the distinction is they're taking in applications and screening their own internal employees. So that, and they do a fine job as far as we know at doing that. What my concern is if we have many departments, for example, I typically use Secretary too, because they're in every department. And so if we had every department that wants to, first of all, and let me say, my biggest concern is not on the recruitment side. But, I think there are challenges that we can overcome. My biggest concern is on changing and modifying the minimum qualification requirements and having every department rewrite and amend those MQs. We call them MQs. Because then we become
we'll
inconsistent.
Get to that in a bit, but
So that's my biggest concern.
Okay.
On the recruitment side, I think they can do it. What my concern is that if each department or agency is posting their own job for their Secretary to on NeoGov, and we have, say, upwards of 25 separate recruitments, one for every department, every division, every agency posted, applicants are going to be confused. They are going to see all the same job 25 times and not know, what do I have to apply 25 times? And the answer would be yes, because if you want that particular recruitment in, say, Department of Health or Department of Human Services, then you would apply to their recruitment announcement. So there is advantages to doing all of this recruitment work collectively so that we can funnel all of the individuals interested to all the agencies, because that department may only hire one of them, one of those candidates, whereas there may be 5 or 6 which other departments would love to have. So there's efficiencies there.
I don't mind departments sharing the list after they've been vetted by their own department and the extra candidates, although that list will be somewhat dated, but probably not as dated as they're used to. I don't think people necessarily want to apply to Secretary 2 and work in kind of a random department, though. Normally, I mean, at least in the people I've talked to, because I've been trying to, subtly recruit for the state too, they want to work for specific departments. I mean, I don't think someone says, I want to be a secretary too, just put me anywhere. I think they have an interest in health, they have an interest in land and natural resources, they have an interest in human resources. I think they want to apply to specific departments because of certain interests or certain maybe people they know or whatnot. So allowing them to apply to specific departments, I don't see how that's a bad thing. That seems like an advantage, because then other people aren't wasting their time on an applicant that may not want to even work for their department, even if they do want to be a secretary too.
There may be a small population where that fits, but there are many people who don't know what they don't know. They don't know that, Department of Land and Natural Resources and what they do, and that's a great place to work, and or Department of Defense. They just might not be familiar, and until you kind of show them the opportunities and invite them to come in for an interview, they may not be aware that that would be a great option for them. And
But they
Department
will
of
have the
Health.
opportunities, right? I mean, it'll all be posted online.
Yes, but I'm concerned that an applicant would perhaps apply for one job and not apply for all of them.
Right, but that's probably the job they want. I mean, are we?
But
are we
they
trying to
may not
force
be
them to
selected
get
for
more
that job.
experience? That's. It just seems a little odd. I mean, and here I am saying that they can share the lists after that, but I think at least their first selection should be to the department they want, right?
It could be.
Okay,
But-
I just don't see the. I guess I'm failing to. I understand that if doing it your way might have some time saving because we can kind of conglomerate everything at once. But from what we're seeing, when it takes 3 to 6 months for the list to even get to the departments, that delay itself is problematic. So by allowing someone to apply directly and by getting that quick callback, I mean, if conglomerating it could get the list out in a very timely manner, we're talking, days or weeks, then I might be in agreement. But until we can fix that process, it seems like the departments should be allowed to independently recruit for, even for secretary twos.
Right, and that's what the holo delegation allows.
Okay, but just so we're clear, I think we've agreed that the departments internally, when they're hiring something like a secretary too, which is shared among many departments, are already doing an acceptable job recruiting internally. They're not violating any laws. They're not violating the merit principle. Is that your understanding of it?
We don't necessarily audit. I assume that they're managing their own recruitments appropriately. Right now, for the most part, they're dealing with classes of work that they're very familiar with, so they know how to screen them. So I have no reason to believe that they're not screening them appropriately.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And in fact, that's kind of the point of this bill, is to allow departments who understand their own positions better to be able to do that kind of initial screening. Have you received any complaints about the merit principle violations from internal reviews or internal hiring?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, well, perhaps one, but I don't know that that's,
One out of like thousands, though,
yeah,
right?
it's not significant.
Okay. So the Cuomo case, I mean, that's what you're referring to when you're saying that departments shouldn't be able to use alternate minimum qualifications. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with that case very well, but generally the merit principle is that we, first of all, want to hire individuals who are qualified, and DHERD undertakes a very extensive job factor analysis when we determine qualifications, and we get buy-in from all the departments that have that class of work, and we determine what is minimally needed for an applicant to be prepared to take on that level of responsibility, that level, those job duties in that class of work. And so to permit departments to just unilaterally change them is problematic, because then we have inconsistency between departments. We already have processes in place that allow departments to make changes to the minimum qualification requirements, but we don't do it without some analysis and some buy-in. So, for example, if their job requires a specific type of license, they can come in for what's called a selective certification. And then we would only screen individuals who meet that specific criteria and refer those applicants for that particular job. But my concern is that the departments will then water down the MQs, and then we have individuals who are not qualified for the level of work that they're being hired for. And we have inconsistency among departments.
And that
So the
department,
MQ
though, that department will pay the price for that, right? I mean, if a department, in its own wisdom, and I think we've already kind of talked about how departments are better able to determine, from internal hiring, better able to determine what kind of person and what kind of qualifications they need for that job. I mean, to be totally frank, I mean, I think they know the jobs better than DHER knows the jobs. And I know you guys try to do a good job of that, but the departments are the ones, in it. If they feel like an applicant can do the job, why not let them hire them?
Well, I guess that's a matter of opinion. I disagree. I think if they're not qualified for the job, then they have other avenues to bring them up. They can hire them at a lower level, train them up if they lack some kind of experience or credential in order to meet the MQs. But I don't believe the answer is to hire individuals who are not qualified.
So to be clear, if Department of Health is hiring a XYZ employee or XYZ, position, and Department of Health believes that this applicant is qualified and will do a good job for this position, DHER can override Department of Health, even though it's Department of Health's expertise and Department of Health's position. Department of Health will be working with this employee. DHER can say, no, we disagree, they're not qualified, even though Department of Health thinks they are.
Yes, currently, individuals who do not meet the minimum qualification requirements for a particular job that they've applied for are not referred to the department for consideration. So that doesn't mean the Department of Health doesn't have other avenues.
Well, they
They
never
can
get a
always
chance,
bring
though.
the job down to a lower level that is commensurate with the experience and education that the individual has, and then train them up to meet the higher level work that's expected.
But for making a determination, and again, I think we're in agreement that once the minimum qualifications are posted, those posted minimum qualifications shouldn't change. I think that you can't, for example, swap one for another and say, well, or have a secret minimum qualification that you didn't tell anyone about, and because you didn't meet the secret one, you don't qualify. That I think is totally inappropriate. But to say that they cannot expand the availability or expand the minimum qualifications, I think is, well, not consistent with Kumo'o, the Kumo'o Supreme Court case, and also it is consistent with the merit principle as well. We're not denying anyone because they didn't meet, or because they failed to meet some secret minimum qualification. What we're saying is, okay, out of these 5 minimum qualifications, you meet 4, and for the 5th one, we're also gonna, you have 5 years of experience, 10 years of experience, you have other experience that we think would allow you to fill that gap, and we're going to consider you as an applicant as well. I don't understand how that violates the merit principle, because you're still considering all other candidates that do meet the 5. You're just also considering maybe a 6th or 7th you're just considering other candidates that might have additional experience or qualifications as well.
So if a department wants to change the MQs, if they want to provide substitutions or they want to consider other types of degrees, there's a process in place where they can come to DHER and suggest changes. And that happens all the time. That is not a barrier to hiring. So we would prefer that the departments come through the established processes, so we have an opportunity to vet that recommendation, especially with other departments with similar positions. They might agree, and we might decide that, yeah, that's appropriate, that now, for example, university degrees have changed. There's all different new technologies, all different new degree types, and perhaps our MQs don't recognize something that's new and different that's also relevant. That's a great example of how we should modify MQs to encompass changes in jobs. But to have a department just unilaterally change it and only for their jobs, I think is not appropriate. It should be, that's why we have under the Constitution and Chapter 76, we have a classification system so that things are reviewed and there's a method to hiring and determining qualifications, that we don't just do things because they're convenient at the time.
Now, if there's a job position that is just a Department of Health job and not shared with other departments, I could see more your point, I think, because that's their responsibility to modify those minimum qualifications to meet that job. It's only their job, so no one else has really any input. But if we are trying to modify a Secretary 2 and give alternate qualifications or whatnot, it's not just Department of Health now we're talking about, right? We're talking about pretty much every department. That sounds like a much more complicated proposal to modify those minimum qualifications that not everyone might agree with. And on top of that, I know we call a Secretary 2 a Secretary 2, but I'm sure that Secretary 2s in DOH do different things than Secretary 2s in DHERD, who do different, I mean, they cannot be doing exactly the same thing, right? I mean, I'm sure their job duties vary from department to department. Is that fair?
Yes, the class
Okay.
specifications are a general overview
Right.
of what the class of work. It doesn't drill down to the specific duties and responsibilities of that unique job. That's what a
Yep.
position description is intended to. But the class specifications talk about the class of Secretary 2 in general as compared to a Secretary 1, as compared to a Secretary 3. So it has each level and what the general characteristics of that job are, what the nature of the work is, what's required, and what the minimum qualifications are.
So if the Secretary 2 at DOH, or if DOH is trying to hire a Secretary 2 and they see someone who they think is going to be a great Secretary 2 for them, but may not be a good one for you folks or DLNR, they're still not going to be able to hire that person. You're saying that they can't make an exception even though they think this candidate is qualified or worthwhile to hire.
No, I'm saying that there are other avenues to address that individual who may not meet MQs. So, for example, if it requires 1 year of secretarial experience and this individual has no experience, but they have lots of potential. They have, good work habits, and maybe they came from another line of work that's not secretarial. They can bring that position down to the 1 level, which doesn't require any secretarial work, train that person up in the secretarial duties, and then they can be reallocated to the 2 level and get promoted. So there are always ways to get to the authorized level or that desirable level. If a candidate is lacking something, departments have avenues currently to bring those candidates up.
That begs the question, why aren't they doing it now?
I don't know. That's a decision that we leave to departments as to how they staff. Many departments do bring positions down to lower levels. For example, I came from Department of Human Services. An eligibility worker is a class of work that is predominantly in human services, and that work is not found anywhere else. So the only way to get individuals up to the authorized level, which is typically the 3 level and requires about 2 years of specialized experience, we always had to bring positions down to the 1 level, hire them with no experience, and train them up. They get promoted, and that's just
No, I understand the process, and I appreciate that that there is some process available, but the status quo begs to differ, right? I mean, Director, we have a lot of departments coming in to complain about not being able to hire, about not being able to review their own applicants, about some of them have people that they know are qualified, that they want to hire, and when that person applies, they do not end up in the list sent back to the department. And it's not because of, an inability to do the same process you're doing right now. So what I'm wondering is, what has DHERD been doing, if anything, to encourage the departments to use this method that you are saying? Because it seems like for years, decades even, they have not been using it, and they're stuck in this situation. So I understand that you're proposing a pathway. It seems like a pathway that no one is walking for some reason, and I'm curious to know why.
Well, I can't answer for them. I know there are specific departments that just typically do not like to downgrade positions. They would rather keep a position vacant than hire somebody and have to spend the time to train them up.
I mean, to be fair, you downgrade the position, you downgrade the pay too, right? Is that fair?
Yes.
And people may not want to work the position if they are going to get paid a lot less. So, I mean, that's a problem generally in trying to hire for the state. But what you're saying is, well, we could hire them if we downgrade their pay, but then that person might not be interested. Even though the department might think that they're qualified for Secretary 2, if you downgrade it, you may lose that candidate. Is that fair?
You could, yes.
Okay.
We also have
Could
other
that be why
pay
they're not walking
programs.
this path?
We also have other pay programs that allow them to hire flexibility in hiring.
Okay. I have other questions, but on this topic, I mean, I kind of want to ask the other departments who are here why they're not doing this. DOH, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, thank you. So in addition to being the LEG coordinator, I'm also a hiring manager with a secretary to and program specialists in my office. And to the chair's comment about a secretary to is not a secretary to, that's very accurate. Even within the Department of Health, that class of work is, their scope of duties varies a lot. The original PD for my secretary to requires shorthand and keeping a calendar. And those, that's our kuleana to update that position description in line with the merit principles and general DHERD classifications. I can speak for myself. I have found great success in recruiting at all levels. So I have a program specialist 5 that has been vacant for a couple of years due to the pandemic, and I recruit at 3, 4, 5. So if by downgrade a position you mean actually knock it down in the budget, that's not what we do. But we ask for permission to recruit at a 3, 4, and 5 so that we, on the books, in the budget, it's a program specialist 5. But if I cannot get candidates, if I don't see those applications because they don't meet the 5, I open it up to 3, 4, 5. So we do get, and I have a person right now who's a program specialist 3 in a program specialist 5 position. And once that person sits in the position for the requisite amount of years, they will automatically qualify into the 4 or the 5. So we have found success with that. And I wanted to address another comment in this committee, which is, I think it'd be helpful when you bring up real-world examples like the Secretary 2 or the Office Assistant 3. Those positions are probably more amenable to general classes of work. What I mean by that is when you have a program specialist, they usually have a college degree. They went to college for some reason. And they do want to work for the Department of Health because they have an environmental degree or a healthcare administration degree. So at the professional level, I do think there is value in identifying the hiring department, not necessarily segregating so that there's an LNR program specialist 5, a DOH program specialist 5, but at least identifying the department who is making the recruitment. Because I won't attract electrical engineers or geologists to work on healthcare policy, but I will probably attract an undergraduate in public health. And so I would really like to see that application up front just as a hiring manager. And on the back end, which is what Dr. Fink's proposal was, if this person does not meet minimum qualifications per our own HRO, then that person is not offered the job. But the opportunity just to see the application, I think would be valuable if we can make it fit within the civil service merit procedures. So depending on the program, I think managers may be aware that they can open for recruitment at 3, 4, 5. I've found personal success with that, and I would encourage other programs to do the same. But again, as we discuss and analyze, there is a very distinct difference between a secretary to and a program specialist in terms of who you want to see. So
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I mean, it sounds like departments might already have the ability to consider essentially different minimum qualifications simply by posting the job at different classification levels. Is that fair? I mean, maybe not, you wouldn't have the power to consider something outside of the minimum qualifications in those class levels, but by posting multiple, you kind of shotgun approach it a bit.
Well, there's a difference between minimum qualifications, I think, and is this person going to work? And certainly, I would agree with the director of DHERD that an agency, I'm speaking on my own behalf as a hiring manager, not on behalf of the director at this point. But I would concur that programs just can't rewrite minimum qualifications just because they want to. They have to follow certain principles, and we need approval, vetting, approval and vetting from a qualified HR person. But just in terms of looking at a professional experience, a resume, and saying, okay, having the years is one thing, but just having the potential is another. And I don't think those two things can be conflated. Certainly, somebody who absolutely doesn't meet minimum qualifications can't be, may be considered, but wouldn't be approved by our HR in Dr. Fink's pilot. But we at least see the resume. And again, our HR will keep us honest. But, sometimes a manager goes with their gut and their experience to say, okay, this person has potential. I have a person who was a master of art history, and I was immediately attracted to that because they do a lot of lateral thinking. And that's the kind of work that we do in, they create meaning and significance out of abstract ideas, and that's the kind of work we do in the policy office. So we look forward to kind of working with DHERD and the other central service agencies to kind of figure out ways to do this, and Dr. Fink has proposed a proposal, has submitted a proposal that not only, I think, addresses some of the process issues, but also kind of reduces the number of steps. So we're not just making a cumbersome, but a necessarily cumbersome process because we have to follow the merit principle, but also looking at how do we apply continuous quality improvement to that and cut out steps where we can, as a pilot.
Okay, I appreciate that. I hope everyone heard art history degree has value. Okay?
It does.
But if you saw that art history degree, did you run into an issue where you weren't asking for someone with an art? I mean, I could see that. I mean, I kind of like that art history degree example because, well, A, I'm kind of surprised they're applying to Department of Health, but good for you.
Yeah.
But B, if you saw that art history degree and you saw some value in it other than what would maybe be on the surface of it, you couldn't consider that art history degree to replace another minimum qualification that it didn't naturally fall under, right? Is that?
Well, I believe that the recruitment, the minimum qualifications don't necessarily, sometimes the minimum qualifications say, for example, to be a geologist in our environmental management division, a Master of Art History isn't going to help you. We require a master's degree in a hard science, geology, hydrology, et cetera. For example, geography wouldn't count, but geology does. But for other program specialists, and it's such a kind of a vague catch-all general professional, I believe the minimum qualifications would be more generalized, like you have to have a bachelor's degree, and if you have a master's degree, that's a preferred qualification. But I don't think, while there are program specialists who say you must have a hard science degree, there are others that say bachelor's, master's preferred. It could be in accounting, it could be in underwater basket weaving, it could be in history.
Okay, no, thank you for your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you.
Bill, did you want to weigh in on this at all, or any other department? Okay. Well, Brennan, would you mind coming up again? I'm actually more on the fence on this one now. If departments have the ability to post multiple positions or multiple classes of a position, and that gives them the flexibility already, if that tool is already in their toolbox,
Yes.
then yeah, maybe we don't need the alternate minimum qualification ability because they sort of have that ability already. My concern, again, that I've already brought up is that the pay is different, and that may deter a lot. And, we're already having difficulty hiring.
Well, the pay is directly related to the provision in our Constitution, our statute 76-1, about equal pay for equal work. So if you're hiring somebody who is minimally qualified and paying them the same rate as somebody who has expertise at a higher level, that's not equal pay for equal work. So there's a recognition that with this additional knowledge, experience, you're being reallocated and your pay is going up to those comparable who are already doing that work, say independently,
But it
at
is
that
hard
level of complexity.
It's hard to one-for-one that thing, though, right? I mean, if we're talking some other degree or some other experience, or, I mean, how does 10 years of experience weigh against a degree or whatnot? So if we were to allow, and if we were to pass this bill and allow departments to consider other qualifications, I would argue that it would still be kind of equal work for equal pay because that person would be qualified just in a different way to be valued at that department at that level of pay.
It really, I think, depends on the situation.
Yeah, no, I
Typically,
completely agree.
if you're hiring them at the lower level, they require a lot more training in order to be fully functioning an independent worker, which is typically the authorized level or the higher level that they would like to recruit at, but sometimes are not able. And if there really truly is, say, a labor shortage or some other market issue, we have other pay programs that can address that.
Yeah,
that
under the
departments
bill-
can propose.
Under the bill, the departments, if the departments were to use this, they would have to justify it to you. I mean, they would have to send you their justification later, too. So if you see a department abusing this thing and hiring some, high schoolers for engineer threes or something, I mean, you could, you'd definitely have a check on them. I mean, this isn't like free reign here. They do need some justification as to why a certain minimum qualification alternative is being used.
I believe those options are already available to them with the tools that we've already got in place. And I don't believe this bill is necessary.
This whole bill or that part?
Both. We've already have the recruitment delegation. I think there are mechanisms in place to address the MQs as well and to address compensation in our current policies.
Okay, but if we did pass this bill, it would, I feel like it would help you folks. It would offload a lot of the work that you're doing onto the departments for select jobs. And again, this isn't a necessary, if Department of Health decides, you know what, I don't want any of it, I want her to do everything, under this bill, it's very optional, right? The departments could make no movement even if this bill was passed, and there would be no change.
Right.
It would only be for jobs that they cherry pick out, that they feel are so important that they want to take it on themselves to fill. And and also jobs that they could not already hire for internally, right? Because they already have the ability to hire, let's say we had an engineer 3 position open. I'm sorry, I thought I heard someone talking. If they had an engineer 3 position open, they could already hire internally, but they can't find a candidate. So they're just recruiting from the outside instead of the inside. I honestly don't see any difference in that.
The reason I believe it's not necessary is because there's already a statute that allows DHERD to delegate authority to do these. And like I mentioned earlier, we already have delegation in place both for shared classes and for unique classes.
But the reality of the situation is that departments for years have not been able to do this. Is that fair?
The recruitment for unique classes, or the delegation for unique classes, has been in place for decades.
But they have not been, it's not been utilized. I mean, you can have a hammer, but if no one is going to ever use it
I have
because
four pages of classes of work that are delegated to departments. Department of Transportation by far has the most.
Yeah, DOT is going to have the most in
have
there. But I mean, if we had
substantial numbers.
we would have a book of jobs if we were for the whole state, right? I mean, 4 pages is 4 pages, but there's probably like 1,000 pages of jobs if we were to print them all out.
Right.
What I'm saying is that's a small fraction of the state jobs available.
Right, but my point is, if they wanted delegation, it's always been available to them, and I don't believe that all departments have the resources and the staffing available to take on the work that should be handled by DHERD and could be done more efficiently by DHERD.
That doesn't seem to be the reality on the ground, though, and that's the confusion that I'm at with this bill, is that you come up here and you tell me that, but when I talk to all the other departments, they're saying that DHERD will not allow them to do that, despite their requests.
Well, as of last week, with the rollout of the HOLO delegation, it is available to all departments now.
Yeah, and I've already gotten feedback from some departments that they don't like that they still prefer this bill. So I'm not sure the HOLO program, and I appreciate your efforts on it, but I don't think the HOLO program is going to be as well received by the departments as we hope. And I hope I'm wrong, because if that could fix it, that's great. I guess I'm not convinced that that's the case yet. So I guess my last line of question is, I just want to make sure it's clear that if departments are allowed to internally recruit for a certain position, that they already have the skills within the department that they would need to hire externally for that same position. Is that fair?
They have certain skills, but they do not necessarily have experience or understanding of the backside of NeoGov. So we do need to provide training for them on how to screen within NeoGov and how to certify applicants within NeoGov. They don't currently do that.
Okay, so it's not technical application review experience that they lack. It's just how to interface with NeoGov. That's the experience they lack. How to extract the data or read things off of NeoGov. That would be your training for them if we were to pass this bill.
Yes.
Okay, but they have the ability, their ability to read an application and determine minimum qualifications is already there.
Generally, yes.
Okay.
It's much more challenging when you're screening applications from the general public versus your own employees, because with your own employees, you know their current job, you know the level, you know what it entails, the scope, the complexity. When you're reviewing applications from external folks, especially if you get foreign applications or from other industries, oftentimes it can be more challenging to screen those applications. But we have staff available that can help them.
But we are treating them the same, right? I mean, we're treating
Yes.
internal applicants the same as we're treating external applicants. So
Yes, but the work is more challenging when you're trying to decipher a resume or an application from an external candidate.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, I guess, is they have the skills to review minimum qualifications, and it's just their ability to use the NeoGov website that they're lacking were we to pass this bill. About how long
Yes.
would it take to train a NeoGov
It's,
website?
I think we scheduled it for 3 half days of training, but it takes a little, we perhaps can do it in 2.
Okay, so maybe like 8 hours of training-ish, 8 to 12 hours of training.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just make sure I actually did get everything. Okay, did you have any other questions? Okay, thank you. All right, you want to go into the other one? Okay, I'll be handing it over to my vice chair for the resolutions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We are going to transition to the several resolutions we have on today's agenda. First up is HCR 15, HR 5, urging the City and County of Honolulu to establish a new satellite City Hall office in Mililani to improve access to government services. We have one person scheduled to testify in person, Vika Lainaholo. Doesn't look like they're present. Please note that we do have several individuals testifying in support, as well as one in opposition, along with supportive testimony from the Hawaii High School Republicans and Hawaii Federation of Republican Women. Being that there's no one to ask questions to, we will proceed to the next one. Oh, I'm sorry, assume no one on Zoom. And no one in the room else wishing to testify. Okay, proceeding to the next one. HCR 68, HR 53, requesting the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations to convene an interagency enforcement task force to combat the underground economy and employee misclassification. Up first, the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations in support.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Takuya Garrett, Bill Kunzman, Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, history major. Department supports the intent of this measure and suggests amendments, the most substantive, which is to take a look at narrowing the scope a little bit, because the reso itself has some pretty ambitious pieces to it. So we made specific recommendations about subparagraphs 5 through 7, and in our testimony we put pages 4 and 5, and it's actually pages 5 and 6. And we also thought maybe another, or on top of that, I guess, would be to maybe look at one industrial sector instead of the whole economy. And we're available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Up next, Pacific Resource Partnership in support.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, Chris Delaney, Pacific Resource Partnership in strong support of this measure. With an amendment we had put in our testimony, and actually I need to make a correction because it's HR 53, I put 61, so with that small correction. And also the amendment specifically would say that we are requesting that the amend the bill by adding the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs Insurance Division, Insurance Commissioner to be a part of the Underground Economy and Employee Misclassification Task Force, if that could be done, and either pages 3 or 4 has that list. And we agree with the amendments proposed by DLIR. I had a chance to take a look at them. One suggestion is that we can focus this maybe on page 3, the task force to combat the underground economy and employee misclassification occurring in the construction industry of Hawaii. Something like that would help to narrow the scope down. And yeah, we're okay with removing those subparagraphs on pages 5 and 6 as stated. And then there was another amendment, I guess, basically, I think It had to do with amendment to page 3, just having the chairperson kind of be the director of labor, and that's fine too. So I think you would just eliminate the deputy director of labor in the language of the bill. So we agree with DLIR. We have that one small amendment we're proposing, and thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else in the room wishing to testify? Anyone via Zoom? No? Questions? Good. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next resolution. HCR 76 and HR 61, urging state departments and agencies to enable employees to telework to the greatest extent possible. Up first is the Department of Human Resources Development, providing comments.
Good morning. DHERD will stand on its written testimony, providing comments, and I'm available for any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Up next, we have the Hawaii Government Employee Association. In support?
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair. Nui Sabas with HGEA. We stand on our written testimony and strong support. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. It's all that we have scheduled to testify in person. Anyone in the room wishing to testify? No one via Zoom. Thank you. Please also note we have testimony in support from the Department of Accounting and General Services. Questions? Good. All right, we will just proceed on to the next one. So HCR 77, HR 62, requesting that the governor establish a leadership accelerator program for exceptional managers in state government. Unfortunately, we don't have any testimony submitted on this bill, but I do have a question for DHERD, if they could come up. Good morning. I know we focus a lot on recruitment, but I think the flip side of retention is really important as well. Can you explain what the state has in terms of professional development programs for current state employees, which this resolution tries to address?
Well, DHERD has a small training office, and so our training manager, Patty McDonald, does have a leadership development training course, which is comprised of both on-demand and in-person curriculum. And I think there are 3 different levels of training for emerging leaders, for experienced managers, and then sort of a higher level leadership development training as well.
I know the prior administration was working on the Kuana Ike program. What is the status of that?
It's in place.
Okay,
It's-
so you have a cohort of exceptional managers that are,
I don't know when the last time it was held. I don't have that information with me.
okay, and then just to confirm, the reason you didn't testify on this is because,
This bill is, makes it the responsibility of the governor's office, so it would not be appropriate for me to.
okay, but they would probably
that.
lean on you to assist with this.
I'm uncertain as to that.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. Questions? Okay, moving on to the next resolution, HCR 78, HR 63, requesting the auditor to conduct a sunrise review of potential impacts of licensure and regulation of certain human resources management personnel. Let's see. Up first, Hawaii Government Employees Association, HGEA, in support.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Chair, Vice Chair, Nui Sabas with HGEA. We stand on a written testimony in support. I would just like to provide a suggested amendment should this resolution move forward. There was a sunrise bill introduced this session. It's HB 1646 to alleviate the concern of the auditor. Should this bill move forward, request an amendment for this resolution. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the room wishing to testify? No one via Zoom. Questions? Okay, we will proceed on to the next one. HCR 80, HR 65, urging state executive departments to review minimum qualifications and compensation for class specifications for job postings and provide suggestions to the Department of Human Resources Development. We don't have anyone scheduled to testify in person, although we do have testimony in support from DAGS, the Department of Accounting and General Services. Anyone in the room wishing to testify? Okay, seeing none, since there's no one to ask questions of, we will proceed on to the next resolution, set of resolutions. HCR 81, HR 66, requesting the Director of Labor and Industrial Relations to amend Title 12, Chapter 15, HAR to clarify that compensation for APRNs under the state's workers' compensation law is distinct from compensations for RNs and shall be 100% of the fees authorized under the Medicare fee schedule. Do we have the Hawaii State Center for Nursing on via Zoom? Okay. Is there anyone else on via Zoom? Oh, actually, we'll go ahead and let the LIR go. Go ahead, Joanne.
Good morning, Chair, Matsuyoshi Vice Chair, Garrett, Joanne Vittenhar with Department of Labor. We stand on our written testimony offering comments, and I do see that Laura Reichert is also on Zoom. Not sure if she's having technical difficulties. Looks like she's coming on now.
Yeah, we're trying to get her
But
attention as well.
I'm available for any questions. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. Hi, this is Laura Reichart. I'm the director of the Hawaii State Center for Nursing. Please apologize. My screen froze for a moment, so I was trying to unmute everything. And thank you for your patience. The Center for Nursing stands on our written testimony with comments, and we also want to recognize the strong and longstanding relationship that the Center for Nursing has had with DLIR, particularly in regards to improving access to care for patients through APRN care. Thank you, and we're available for any comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else in the room wish to testify? No one else via Zoom? Okay, questions? Okay. All right, thank you. We'll proceed on to the next set of resolutions. HCR 211, HR 191. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. HCR 165, HR 144. Requesting DHER to conduct a sample survey of for-profit, nonprofit, and government organizations in Hawaii that have successfully implemented remote work, hybrid work, or telework arrangements. Up first, DHER providing comments.
We'll stand on our written testimony, providing comments and pointing out the challenges of doing such a study. Thanks.
Okay. Josh, I don't think she trusts you because she brings her purse every time she comes up. Up next, Holomua Collaborative. You might want to bring your bag up too.
Chair, Vice Chair, thanks so much for hearing the resolution. Of course, I won't go through all of my testimony. Just to note that one of the main ideas of doing the sample survey is to come up with good examples of local organizations that have been able to find ways to keep measuring productivity, to make sure that there are good examples and best practices for managers to manage people who are working remotely. And the idea being, if we can provide some of those examples, they can inure to the benefit of the state and then hopefully help with recruitment and retention for workers in the state executive branch as well, which would also help by keeping people in their local communities, broadening the applicant pool that the state can pull from all over the state and help local economies. Just wanted to note two additional things. One is I saw in the testimony that Yuhiro had mentioned an amendment to just essentially kind of clarify that they would be really in a consulting role to DHER. That makes sense to us. I'd have no concerns with that. And then additionally, I've shared with DHER that we would be willing to do as much as possible on our side to help with that sample survey. You might have seen, for example, there are a number of organizations that submitted testimony talking about how their organizations do remote work, how they have suites of best practices, or those are exactly the kind of groups that we would reach out to, trying to help collect as much of this information as possible, make it as much of a light lift, a many hands make light work kind of endeavor over the session, over the post-session between now and next year. Thanks so much. I'm here for any questions you got.
Okay, thank you very much. And apologies to DBED for skipping you folks over in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. Chung Chang with DBED, Strategic Broadband Coordinator. We stand on our written testimony in support. I just want to comment that, we've had conversation with Josh, so we're looking forward to seeing information a certain way so we can help with, our portion of the result. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Via Zoom, University of Hawaii. Providing
Aloha,
comments?
Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Burnett, and I'm here on behalf of UHERO, the University of Hawaii Economic Research Organization. As Josh mentioned before, we believe that UHERO's faculty could be most helpful by serving in a consultative role to the Department of Human Resources Development on this study. So we therefore respectfully proposed an amendment to reflect the cooperative role rather than UHERO taking the lead, identifying the areas of lower housing costs and decreased access to good paying jobs. Mahalo for the opportunity to provide testimony.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anyone else in the room wishing to testify? Anyone else via Zoom? No? Okay. We also do have testimony in support from Hawaiian Host Group. Okay, questions? You have a question for Deherd?
I had my bag stolen once before, so
Okay.
I'm scarred for
I'm
life.
sorry, I didn't mean to make light of that. What was I going to ask? Okay, so would you be, I know you noted resource and capacity concerns within your department.
Yes.
Which you can certainly appreciate, but would you be amenable to receiving help from Holumua Collaborative, DBED, and UHERO as they indicated they're willing to
Yes,
provide?
certainly. Yes, it'd be much appreciated.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to our last resolution, HCR 211, HR 191. Urging the Department of Accounting and General Services and the Department of Human Resources Development to evaluate subsidizing public transit for public employees. Up first, Deherd, providing comments.
Yeah, so we'll stand out a written testimony providing comments, and I'm available for any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the room wishing to testify? No one else via Zoom. Please note we also have testimony and support from the Department of Accounting and General Services, DAGS, as well as Blue Planet Foundation. Any questions? Okay, thank you everyone who came to testify. We will recess for decision-making. Recess.
Reconvening for decision-making. First up, we have SB 3007 ST2 related to hiring. Chair's recommendation is to defect the date to July 1st, 3000, and to pass this out. Members, any comments? Okay. Yeah, I may be adding something in the committee report as well, but I'll think about that. All right, Vice Chair, for the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members voting on Senate Bill 3007 ST2. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Capella, excused. Representative Martinez, likewise excused. Representative Sayama?
Aye.
Representative Tam?
Aye.
And Representative Alcos, also excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to SB 1099 ST1 relating to taxation. We are going to be deleting language that would have extended the period of time in which a county could have adopted the surcharge on estate tax, as Maui has already enacted the surcharge. We're also going to be clarifying the authority of the counties, or adding the authority of the counties really, to use the surcharge on state tax revenues for housing, infrastructure costs, and related financing agreement costs and debt service. I believe the date is already defected, but if it's not, we're going to be defecting the date to July 1st, 3000. Members, any comments? Okay, seeing none. Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members voting on Senate Bill 1099 SD1. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye, noting the excused absences of Representatives Capella, Martinez, and Alcos. Any members voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, all members present vote aye. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. I'll be handing it over to Vice Chair for the resolutions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Give me 1 second here.
Too late, they're all different.
Okay, thank you, members. For the resolutions today, the first one up, HCR 15, HR 5. This is the one regarding opening, urging city and county to open a new satellite city hall in Mililani. Recommendation is to pass as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Chair for the vote, please.
Okay, Chair's recommendation is to pass HCR 15 and HR 5 as is. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Rep. Capella is excused. Rep. Martinez is excused. Rep. Sayama.
Aye.
Rep. Tam.
Aye.
Rep. Alcos is excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Up next, HCR 68, HR 53. This is the one requesting DLIR to convene a task force to combat the underground economy. The recommendation is going to be to adopt the amendments from DLIR as well as PRP. So first of all, we will accept DLIR suggestions that the DLIR director be named the chair. We will limit the scope of this task force to the construction industry. And we will further reduce the scope of the task force by eliminating subsection numbers 5, 7, and 8 on pages 5 and 6 regarding, again, the scope of this task force. And we will also add the insurance commissioner as a member of the task force. Members, any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote, please.
Okay, voting on HCR 68 and HR 53. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments noting the excused absences of Capella, Martinez, and Alcos. That'll be noted for the rest of the agenda. Any noes or reservations? Okay, seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next one up, HCR 76, HR 61, urging state departments to enable employees to telework to the greatest extent possible. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote, please.
Okay, Chair's recommendation is to pass unamended HCR 76 and HR 61. Any noes or reservations? Seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, Chair. HCR 77, HR 62. Even though we didn't receive any testimony on this, we believe it's still worth pursuing. So as such, the recommendation is to pass as is. Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote, please.
Okay, Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass HCR 77 and HR 62. Sorry, as is, right?
Yes, as is.
As is. Any noes or reservations? Seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Next set of resolutions, HCR 78, HR 63. This is the one regarding a sunrise review of the licensure and regulation of certain HR professionals. I want to thank HGEA for pointing out the bill that the auditor must have missed, HB 1646, so we'll pass on a note to them. Other than that, the recommendation is to pass this out as is. Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote, please.
Okay, Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass HCR 78, HR 63 as is. Noting the previously excused absences, any members voting with reservations or no? Seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Chair. Next set of resolutions, HCR 80, HR 65. This is the one urging state departments to review minimum qualifications and compensation for class specs for job postings and to provide suggestions to DHERD. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote, please.
Okay, Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass HCR 80, HR 65 as is. Are there any noes or reservations? Okay, seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next one up, HCR 81, HR 66. This is regarding workers' compensation and APRNs and RNs. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote, please.
Okay, Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass HCR 81 and HR 66 as is. Any noes or reservations? Okay, seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Up next is HCR 165, HR 144. This is the one requesting DHERD to conduct a sample survey of for-profit, nonprofit, and government organizations that have successfully implemented remote work, hybrid work, or telework arrangements. The recommendation here is to pass as an HD1, incorporating UHERO's suggested amendment, having them essentially serve as a working coordination with DHERD. And do want to thank Holomo Collaborative and others for willing to provide support that DHERD needs for this effort. Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote, please.
Okay, Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass HCR 165 and HR 144 with amendments. Any noes or reservations? Okay, seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members, last resolution for this agenda, HCR 211, HR 191. This is the one urging DAGs and DHERD to evaluate subsidizing public transit for public employees. The recommendation is to pass as is. Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote, please. Oh, it's interesting. I was looking for that. We did that one. We're good. Yeah.
So you want it unamended?
Yes, as is.
Okay, Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass HCR 211 and HR 191 as is. Any noes or reservations? Okay, seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. We are adjourned.